So today on the podcast, we've got a great guest, Brad Elder, who is a former Navy SEAL, was involved in a massive development project where he oversaw construction as well as member relations and also used EOS in the business. So if you're interested in operations and how someone at the highest level implements it tactically in the business, you're going to want to pay attention. All right, so today I've got a special guest. We're talking to Brad Elder, and Brad, you and I met kind of in an interesting scenario, not the typical way two guys probably come across each other, but thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, good. Nothing like meeting like we did, so it was good.
Kindred spirits, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good place to start. You know, give us the background as to how we met. We're going to talk a lot today about like operations and a little bit about real estate development and leadership, planning, strategy, execution, all the good nerdy stuff. But maybe we start there with kind of how we met, and then we'll dig into your background a little bit.
Yeah, so, a mutual friend, of course, and linked us up. I came to a little summit that you guys were having here in San Diego and just showed up on a Saturday morning, the day after I lost my last job, and so kind of didn't want to show up that day, and just walked in and was like, just go for it. Had a great day. Felt like I connected really well with you guys. Had a great crew there, and learned a lot. And just think you and I hit it off just with our kind of operations background and the way that you go about explaining and breaking down a business and giving the visuals and the frameworks that can help businesses. So I think our brains think alike in that way, and it was pretty eye opening for me to see someone else's brain work that way.
Yeah, for sure, man. That was an interesting setup. I think we had like 10 business real estate type guys there, like real estate investors or like large business owners. And then what was there, like maybe 5 team guys there? And so kind of an interesting mix, whereas like nobody knew who should talk first.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for us, us coming into that environment, like we're totally outmatched in the kind of the business expertise and the language. And so for guys that a couple of the guys were still active, and so them kind of being able to see like, oh, this is business language, like I'm not even sure what we're talking about, but that have a ton of experience in the military and in special operations. And so for them to be able to step in, and I think that's something we'll probably get into is being able to kind of notice those patterns where there's a lot of similarities between special operations and business, and being able to apply those. So,
Yeah.
so I think it
Yeah,
was really
that was a great time because to me it was so funny. I'm great on putting the pieces together, like recognize the patterns, where the gaps are, and putting the pieces together. And it's funny you say that, that like feeling outmatched or whatever, because I think all the other guys in the room would have said the exact same thing, that they felt outmatched because all the things that they struggle with is around like planning and execution and accountability. And it's like, oh, that's not the stuff that these guys struggle with. And so, it's very complimentary, I think. So that was cool to kind of witness and have some cool conversations and stuff. But maybe, yeah, give us a little background on like what you've done, how you got into it, why. I always find it interesting. I think there's always common threads people have where there's something about what they've done, what they're doing now, what they're trying to do next, where you find like some commonality, right? It's that thing inside of you that you can't help but do it no matter where you go.
yeah, yeah.
But go
So
back. You can take us back as far as you want.
yeah. So grew up in a fairly small town in Virginia, Roanoke, Virginia. After that, went to the Naval Academy. Didn't really know exactly what I was going to do when I went there, but knew that the military was a good path for me. I kind of come from a military family, and when I got there, just realized like, you know, special warfare looked like kind of the route that seemed the most intriguing and most like good fit for me, and so pursued that and was fortunate enough to get a contract to come out to San Diego, California after graduation, and then went through all the training out here in Coronado, and then a couple years later joined my first team. Spent a couple years in the teams, a couple deployments. Spent a couple years in Hawaii, which I fell in love with. I think I spent probably spent more time surfing than anything else, but that's kind of what I wanted out of it. So it worked out great. Got another really interesting deployment out of that, something that was very outside of the box and not what you would expect being a SEAL. And went to Sri Lanka for like 11 months and worked in a pretty cool like interagency position where I was dealing with Department of State, the agency, Department of Defense, the host nation, a bunch of different militaries within the host nation as well as within the Maldives. So it was a really cool. I was wearing a suit and tie to work, which I didn't really expect to be doing as a SEAL, and just learned a lot. Like just being able to understand up, down, sideways, different agencies. Like I felt like it was the most business-like experience that I could have received, like while being in the military. Just
Mm.
dealing with a lot of different relationships, understanding how to run a team, a small team, but also how to work with a lot of different kind of competing interests. You have to put on different hats for different people and different and sort of walk into a room where you know that something is important for that person, and so you just have to kind of tailor whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish to what they want to also accomplish. So that was a really good experience. Just a lot of fun as well. I got to surf a bunch and explore the country. It's a beautiful country, so great people. And then after that, came back and decided that I was ready to try the civilian world out. And about a year or two later, separated from the Navy and joined up on a private club real estate development, and incredible like golf course, a bunch of like 5-star luxury villas and really high quality operations. So that was like a whole new world for me. I had only dabbled in real estate a little bit, just as a kind of a little side hustle while I was in the military. So it was interesting for me. Got to experience a lot of amazing. We had a great team, amazing people that I got to work with. A lot of challenges. Doing any kind of ground up development, especially in the developing country where you have the American way. You have the this in this case it was in Mexico, so you have to deal with the Mexican way of doing things. And so taking that kind of experience from Sri Lanka and being able to apply some of those same principles was really helpful, being able to manage all the different relationships, all the competing interests. And then after that, now I'm kind of getting in doing some more kind of COO type integrator type role. I spent the last like year and a half, 2 years using EOS as a tool for scaling and organizing the development. Now just kind of running with that and working on some new projects. So,
Dude, it's awesome. Right away, I'm like, how much did the international work having to, coordinate or negotiate or comply with departments of state, departments of defense, other countries, et cetera? How much does that translate to development where you're kind of quarterbacking a lot of different municipalities, agendas, personalities?
yeah, it's really similar. I think you and I think the same way on a lot of things. With like, it might be a different thing. We might call it something else, but it's the same kind of pattern or the same. It's a lot of things are in parallel. So
Mm,
very similar experiences where you can draw from that. Hey, I might have been in a different country dealing with a government, but it's no different than like being in a different city and dealing with the local government getting zoning or whatever. So it's using those experiences to kind of like, oh yeah, like it's the same thing, just it's just a different color or different language or something, but it's the same thing. So
yeah.
it's really
In-
helpful.
Interesting. Do you have any like examples of that? Because I think when we look at the complexity that's involved, is there scenarios where like, oh, like this is the same, first principles, like regardless of how complex this is just like this other scenario I went through, and so I'm just going to start here and start chipping my way through it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great question. I think one of the biggest, it comes back to, communicating. Like I
Mm,
think when you're dealing with all these different relationships, or you're doing ground up development, or you're running operations in a different country, it's being able to like communicate really well with all the different entities and understanding like what they care about is really important. I think like any type of negotiation or dealing with permitting or whatever, it's like what's important to the other person and then giving them what is important to them, like not fighting it just because you think that you're right. It's understanding like, hey, this is important to them. So I need to at least give them that so that I can get what I want out of it.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Tell me this. Is there anything that people overlook when it goes from like the strategy or the planning to then actually putting things into motion or putting it into action that either you were like, oh, I didn't realize that we just do this naturally, in teams, but these guys are completely skipping a step. Or maybe it's just in general, like nobody likes to sit in the discomfort or nobody likes to work out all the details or the what ifs or whatever. But is there any commonalities there of just making that transition from the planning phase into actually putting things into action where people maybe commonly take a misstep or even just best practices you see where you're like, this is an absolute, like we do this every time just because it's foolproof?
Yeah, and I would even say, even in the military, I think probably one of the biggest and within the military, within business is clarity. Like I think
Mm,
that having a clear objective in what you're trying to accomplish is something I've seen that just leads to a lack of execution, a lack of accountability, a lot of wasted time, a lot of wasted energy. People get burnt out, people get frustrated, and I think it really stems from a lack of clarity. I think that not taking the time to figure out what it is that you really want to accomplish, the same way, you write down your goals, when you're a kid or whatever, as an adult, when you get really clear on the, with the end in mind, that I think is a step that's really skipped, and it can obviously apply to like an entire organization, sort of like the mission, the vision, but it can apply to every little project that you're working on or every little initiative that you're running is like, let's get really clear first, because if we don't, we're going to spend a lot of time, in phase B, C, D, E, just bouncing back and forth as opposed to like going quickly from A to Z. So I think clarity is probably one of the biggest pieces that I've seen it in both kind of in parallel. Like a lack of clarity leads to a lack of execution.
mm. Interesting. When you say communication, I mean, I think right away of, the communication and clarity that works its way down through the organization. But is it just as important to see it sometimes like feedback loop coming back up? Like I always maybe misappropriately use the example of like, we need the frontline information from the troops going back to the general to be able to make, educated decisions based on data and facts and not just like man in the high tower trying to create strategy blindly. Like how do you create some of those feedback loops or get that clear communication when it is not one to many, but like many to one and it's feeding back up?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that a lot, and I think that the clarity. So it starts with the clarity, obviously, because you can't, your people can't necessarily give you good feedback if they're not really sure what they're giving feedback on. And so I think as a leader, that's extremely important. They need to know what right looks like.
Mm,
I'm a big fan of data. Like I think, if it gets measured, it gets managed. And so if you're not using some sort of measurable to guide like the execution, it's really hard to get feedback. Like otherwise it's all kind of emotional and emotions go up and down all the time. But I think it's really important, and you want to sort of instill honest feedback. Like I think it's really important, as the leader or as a leadership team, having that open and honest conversation, not only within your team, but also having that open and honest conversation with everyone in an organization. Of course, there's certain things that, you have to kind of hold tight, but I think that having that open communication, and then when someone does give feedback, you have to take it on, and you might not change what you're doing, but I think at least empowering your people to be able to give that feedback is really important. But if they don't know what if they're not clear on what it is that they're doing, then they can't really give you good feedback. So I think that, you have to start with that in order to get good feedback on it, because you might, and I know we've talked about this, you might You can have the strategy and then you can have the execution. And if you tell someone, hey, here's our strategy, go execute it, and they execute it just like you said, but it didn't work. Now I know, like, okay, I can step back and look at the strategy and I need to change that versus if I just say do this and they go execute it, it's like, what was the strategy? Did they understand the why behind it? So I think that if you're not clear at the beginning, then it makes it really hard for, to be able to give that feedback. So
Yeah, which it leads me kind of to my other question I wanted to ask you is like, how do you, or what have you seen, I guess, that is a good tactic or strategy for creating accountability without like micromanaging? Because we always say like you want to be outcome based, not task based, or you want to make sure your people understand how to think and not just what to do. But there are times where I just need you to do, I just need you to execute. How do you see that translate? Maybe some of the swings and misses that happen more like on the, development or business side of things that you feel like weren't an issue, when you made that transition, what did you notice where it's like, oh man, these guys don't do this? Because I feel like accountability is always the biggest topic that comes up, and people either go completely hands off, like I say, they throw the keys to the 16-year-old and they're just like, good luck. They're just like, yep, I delegated, I'm not micromanaging. Or they go hard the other way and they're like, I need to see your calendar and what you're doing every 15 minutes, and they go hard into like the micromanagement. What have you seen works well that maybe doesn't fall to those extremes?
yeah, yeah, great question. And it's actually one thing that I think the EOS framework does a good job of. The way that the L10, the level 10 meeting is set up, I think really helps drive that accountability. It's sort of the way that the agenda is set up. You start with kind of the reporting, then you move into, the priorities, and then you go through the to-dos. Like it's really important that you actually, I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where it's just talking and talking and talking, and then we're like, okay, cool, see you next week. And then you like come back the next week and we're like, we don't remember what we talked about. There was no like check-in to see like, did we do these 10 action items over the last week? There's no that, I mean, that's how you drive accountability, is right, is like just checking in and saying like, did this get done? It didn't get done. Okay, why not? Oh, I didn't have time, or oh, I wasn't able to do it. Okay, well, let's talk about it, and that's where like the issues portion comes in. And I think that going through that exercise, as like painful as it is, sometimes it's it's paramount. Like that's the only way, you can't you can't do some of the stuff we do in the military to like drive accountability. It's not, in the military you have like it's a lawful order or whatever, or some stuff we did in the SEAL teams to, to keep someone, with like, physical punishment or something like that, that drives accountability. You can't do that in business. So you have to have mechanisms like, you know, checking in every week to just say like, did it get done? And you start to see like if it's consistent not being done, you can then kind of pinpoint, okay, either we have the wrong process in place, like this person is set up to fail and they need help, or they don't have the training, or they don't have the resources, which is like, okay, that's on us. Or it's just this might be the wrong person. This person doesn't get it. They don't want to do it, or they're not capable. And so then you can kind of triage from there. But if you're not doing that, like that's how you hold people accountable. It's just, did you get it done? So
Yeah. Was that a tough transition when you got out of the military, figuring out how to create consequences for like lack of accountability? Like you said, you mentioned like the to-dos, the to-do doesn't get done. Okay, now like what's the repercussion? What do we do about it? Yeah, does some of the strategies that you had previously used now not actually work in the marketplace, or, aren't normal practice in the marketplace? I'm thinking even like with my kids, when we're in Maui, we live in a cul-de-sac, and it's like maybe a quarter mile to the end of the cul-de-sac. And so there's a house down at the end, it's got a mailbox. And so sometimes something happens and they don't follow through, whatever. It's like, hey, I need you to go touch the mailbox. And so I'm wondering if this, physical punishment is going to backfire on me one day where it's like, oh yeah, that doesn't work here.
yeah.
But was that tough making that transition? Like, was that eye opening to be like, oh man, this tool in my tool belt now is null and void and I got to figure out a new one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, you know that you can't really do that in a in a business, you know. You can do it with your kids, which is great. I think that's a great way to do it. And then you just keep moving that mailbox a little bit further back.
Yeah,
But
yeah, there we go. Yeah, sometimes it's like I need you to touch it twice.
yeah, or hey, go to the mailbox but drag this tire behind you, you know, do
But yeah,
something
we
like
have
that.
a like a medicine ball, like a 20-pound med
Yeah.
ball. And so sometimes it's like I need you to take the med ball and go touch it. Or I've
Yeah.
got older boys that are a year apart, so sometimes it'll be like, hey, I need you to alternate who carries the ball. Like when they're fighting and bickering, it's giving
Yeah.
them like a common thing to work on together, you know, to kind of
Yeah.
get some of that early testosterone out.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a great I like that a lot. That's that does sound very very teams like, so
You know, that's why we click, man.
yeah, yeah.
Tell me
uh
about when you discovered EOS. What was that like? Was that like light bulb moment to where you were like, "Oh man, this makes so much sense," or was it like, "I've kind of heard all this before"? What was that like?
no, it was absolutely light bulb. You know, in the first, call it 6 months that I was, you know, a civilian and was working in the development project, it was just chaos, you know, not like actual chaos, but just like there wasn't a lot of consistent progress. And it seemed like we would be working on something for months that like really just needed like a decision to be made and like move forward. And so it really, yeah, just no real accountability. And so EOS kind of gave like the you know, the business version of like you know, gave the language and the framework, the system to be able to actually drive those things in a way that's like applicable to business. And so it kind of gave me, you know, the same way a quarterback goes on the field, he has a playbook, you know, like a team doesn't, a football team doesn't have a playbook. Like, why would you run a business without a playbook? You know, it's a manual for like how to work on the business, not necessarily in the business. And I think that's missed a lot with when I kind of have stepped into some other businesses. It's the lack of clarity. You know, if you don't have the clarity at the beginning, like the rest kind of just you're you're ping ponging across, going left and right. And so EOS really helped like put the rails on the business. And of course, you're still going to have chaos. You still got to put fires out. That doesn't go away, but it at least gives you a little bit more of like a check in to be like, yeah, this, we don't need to spend our time on this, or no, this is really important. And it drives like open and honest conversations, you know, getting to the root cause of things so that you can actually solve like 10 issues at once, I think was really valuable because it just not coming from, you know, in the military, you come from a huge, you know, it's very structured, it's very organized. And then to go to like a startup where it's the complete opposite, it really gave me that like the ability to like, you know, put something on paper that was business oriented and that was helpful. So
Yeah, I like that analogy. We often say it's like building the race car to put the driver out on the track. Like not having the playbooks, like not having the race car. It's like you send your driver out on the track in flip flops or in a go kart, and then you're frustrated they're not winning races. They're frustrated they're not winning races, but nobody's ever actually built the race car for them. I think the playbook applies in the same way. It's like we're sending the quarterback on the field, could be with a star-studded team of A players, but we're all on different pages. There's no playbook that we're running. And so sometimes that actually matters more than the players you have in the organization. Because if we're not on the same page, like we got people pulling in different directions, we're not going to be aligned.
yeah, it really just leads to frustration, to burnout, you know,
Yeah.
is just, you know, I keep running this route and I don't get the ball. And it's like, well, because the quarterback wants you to run a different route, you know? So it's like, if you're not having that, if you don't have the, you know, the scorecard or, you know, the to-do list that you're checking in on, how does the other person know? You know, it's the same way you like in a relationship, you know, a good relationship, you set expectations, you know, here's what I expect from you and you expect from me. And then you're constantly going back and you're looking at that, you're tweaking it, you're moving forward. So I think that it's a lot of the same exact principles that you just can apply throughout. And the military, you know, we kind of do like a, you know, you kind of strategy and then you plan and then you go and you execute. And then the part that is a lot of times miss in the I think in business is like the debrief, the feedback loop. of like, okay,
Mm,
what went well, what didn't go well, let's talk about it. And I think that's really important. That's how you get better, is going over lessons learned. And unfortunately, in the military, sometimes it's learned in blood, which is very unfortunate, but it does drive home, a lot of things when that does happen. People learn real quick what not to do, and so when the stakes are a little bit less, we don't necessarily have that feedback loop. But if you want to run an effective business, efficient business, that's you need it. So
yeah. Well, since you're talking feedback loops, a friend of ours mentioned this, and I brought it up to you earlier. Is can you explain the concept of OODA looping and what that looks like, and like when you use it, why you use it?
yeah, yeah. So OODA loop is observe, orient, decide, and then act. So it's basically just breaking up that kind of that gives language to the planning phase. So observe being like, okay, I'm observing this, therefore like, I see this happening, and then you kind of orient yourself to that. Okay, what does that actually mean to me? How does that? How should I go about either, you know, applying this concept, or what do I need to do with it? And then you decide. So that's the decision part. You've kind of talked through it, and then act. So that's going out and actually executing whatever it is, and that's what you should kind of is almost you're constantly doing it. We just do it naturally. Anytime we see something, we kind of naturally, that's what our brain does. It just goes through the OODA loop. But it's just kind of a framework for basically that planning phase, and applying that. I think that's one thing EOS kind of does that for you with like with the L10. When you're kind of like when you're solving issues, you're okay. We're observing something. We're
So you would kind
talking
of
about
substitute it similar to like a IDS.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. You're identifying, you're observing what's going on, you're talking about it, you're discussing, that's your orientation, and then you're solving, which is the solve, act or deciding, and then act is the to do. And that's like it hopefully goes and gets done, and then that's why you have to the next week you circle back and you say, did it get done? And it's like, no, okay, then we have to OODA loop it again. So I think it's sometimes it's painful, it's boring, it's simple, but that's what drives growth and drives progress.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the things that kind of caught my attention when we first talked, and you mentioned that you were working on this big, like massive development project and utilizing a lot of EOS. I was curious because I feel like there's some spots where EOS probably falls short in some of that. I know I've witnessed it when it comes to the three big ones I always notice is like leadership development. It really just kind of overlooks that conversion cycle, which obviously huge in development. It's like, well, we don't even know if this plan that we came up with that's going to get executed 18 months later, like how are we supposed to create a feedback loop or know that we're on track or that it's working or that we even set a reasonable expectation until we hit some of these, baseline milestones, et cetera. How am I supposed to check in on that weekly when I'm not even going to get a real progress report for 3 months? And now I'm supposed to be setting a new rock, but I don't even have good feedback from the first one. So that conversion cycle, and then just kind of project management in general, which ties in as well. But when so much stuff is constantly changing rather than being very, cyclical, where what do I really put on a scorecard when it comes to project management? And there's so many moving pieces and variables all going on, some in my control, some not in my control. How did you see those two? Where did it work really well, and where were there maybe some gaps or flaws where you had to use your experience and fill in what it wasn't doing for you?
Yeah, and EOS it's very, like you said, it's very cookie cutter. If you run like EOS pure, it's certainly has its like shortfalls, and we primarily used it at like the leadership level. It wasn't as much into like the weeds of everything. I
Hmm.
started to like apply it to the different departments. Having rocks or priorities. Like I think every department can have priorities, like they should. So just being able to kind of take at least some of the principles and being able to apply them. So priorities. Of course, on the project management side, the scorecard is really difficult, and even even at the leadership level, I was always struggling to kind of think of like what are these real indicators, because we're still very much in the growth phase where we're like we don't quite know what right looks like yet. And so yeah, it's definitely difficult. I think it's probably works really well at a company that's like actually stabilized, or
Hmm.
is fairly stabilized, just because they're like, I know, okay, I know the exact numbers I need to hit. I know I need 30 leads to get 10 customer. So I think that part is definitely challenging, but I think like most things, you can take the very basic principles and you can apply it. So I would say that there's of course some tailoring that kind of needs to happen, which I think, with what you do, Ian, like I think that's what you've been able to kind of do, is take a lot of those principles that are really helpful, and a lot of people they get missed. It's very basic. And
Yeah.
we used to say in the teams, like, be brilliant at the basics. And I
That's
think
good.
a lot of yeah I think there's like a misconception that, to be doing like really high speed stuff and working really efficiently, that you're like, you know bending bullets around a corner. It's like, oh, they must just be special. And it's like, no, we're really really good at the basics. Like, we drill the basics until, like, we have calluses on our hands. And I think, like, in a business, you kind of have to do the same thing. It's just chopping wood, and you have to just keep like iterating on it. And I so I think EOS
Where,
is
where
good
should
for
where
that.
should people where should people have business calluses? Like, what are the business basics that they should be drilling to where they're calloused?
Yeah, I mean, having having a getting clear, like getting clarity on what you're doing, over communicating. Like,
Mm.
there's the saying that you have to say something 7 times before anyone actually, like, understands or listens to you. I think, like, it's over communicating. It's checking in. Did you do this? Did you not do this? Like, it's just driving those really simple things that are boring. It's not fun. Like, doing meetings is not fun. Saying, hey, did this get done, over and over again, it's not fun. Solving issues, like, we used to say, as like an officer in the military, your primary role is like understand, communicate, move, and then, like, worst case scenario, shoot. Whereas, like, an operator, your job is shoot, move, communicate. And so I
Mm.
think it's sort of the opposite. And so I think that those first things, understand and communicate, that's like really, like, as a business owner or a leader in your business or even a manager, I think that you're just constantly doing those two things. I'm understanding what's going on, we're discussing it, we're OODA looping it, and then we're communicating it, and then we're communicating it again, and we're communicating over and over again. So I think those are the places that I would get calloused in.
Yeah, no, that's great. Are there any other like little sayings, phrases, acronyms that stick with you? Because I know, like, we've got some mutual friends, and they just rattle off these little things, and I'm like, dang, dude. Like, one of them he said was, it takes a wolf to lead wolves, and so everybody wants to have like an A player team, but
Yeah.
yet like they're not the guy that everybody's going to look up to, and so just like those little idioms where they've stuck with you. Is there anything else that's kind of carried over where you're like, yeah, this is going to be for life?
Yeah, for sure. I think I love, like, lead by example. I know that's kind of like or lead from the front was sort of one of
Mm.
those that originally, like, stuck with me as, like, I really like that principle, or that kind of saying. I think it applies to business. I think it applies to parenting. I think it applies to everything. Like, if you're not willing to exceed or meet the expectations that you're setting for other people, good luck. Like, that's not the way to go about it. I'm sure I mean, I was listening to something the other day talking about for parenting, the best thing that you can do as a parent is just, like, be an example, like loving your wife, and, like, showing her love is like the biggest indicator for, like, your kids growing up and, like, being good adults, is like because you loved your wife. And I think, like, showing them that, like just being the example, versus like telling someone how to do something. It doesn't land quite as well. And I think that, yeah, so lead by example, lead from the front was always one that really stuck with me. I think we talked about, pays to be a winner was one that we talked about the other day,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one.
which is a funny one. But I think there's a way to apply it to business as well. Getting guys to move from one quadrant to the other, on the on that. So there's plenty. I've got too many. Sometimes I gotta like pull it back and stop using our little sayings, but they're helpful, I think.
Yeah. What was some of the harder transitions when you went from military into the marketplace that you would maybe give some advice around other guys that are in the military looking to make that transition? I know we've used the phrase before of like there's some rough edges to smooth out. What's some advice you would have for somebody who's maybe still in the military but looking to make that transition into the marketplace?
Yeah, couple things. One, don't think you're gonna get it right the first time. Like it's okay. Don't think that you have to figure it out right when you get out.
Hmm.
You're gonna. I would almost recommend like just go do something for a year, go do something for 2 years. I'm a big like on the job training kind of person. I don't really love school, so that just wasn't a good fit for me, and I'd much rather just like get into it. I think that's helpful. I would also say I think just figuring out how to translate, that's one of the hardest things. I think guys think that there's this huge knowledge gap because they've been just doing military. And so, but it's all the same stuff. Like it really is when you like boil it down, the planning cycle, the these business fundamentals, we're using the same stuff in the military, the special operations. It's just a different language. It's just
Mhm.
we call it rocks or priorities, and in the military we call it objectives. Like it's the same stuff. It's just being able to translate it. So read a read a business book. Read a couple business books. You'll start to see the patterns. Just look for the patterns, and you start to really connect the dots. I think at least that's how my brain works. I can't speak for everyone.
Yeah.
And then
What was something that kicked you in the teeth? Like when you made that transition, what was something you're like, oh, this is different. Like I did not expect this or wasn't prepared for this.
Yeah, I think just that, I mean, granted, I went into a startup, so just the, disorganization, like
Mm.
oh wait, you guys don't have like an organization chart? Like you guys don't have job descriptions? Like you don't have like some of those things where you're just like, oh, like that's where we're at. Like you're doing, millions of dollars in revenue and you don't have a job description, like, which is like cool, like that's impressive. But I think that it's important to like, okay, like let's at least start there. Let's get some direction, and then you can turn it into way more. You can grow and you get out of just firefighting. Like firefighting is not, it's fun for a little while, but you can't do it forever. So it's like you gotta put some of that organization in. I think that was sort of like a big gap that I kind of was like, wow, you're not even sure who your direct reports are. Like, okay.
Yeah. Back to that like clarity piece, right?
Yeah.
Communication, clarity. Okay. Last question for you. You, as long as I've known you, which hasn't been that long, but we've spent some time together, and you've always been so even keeled and mellow and composed. What's something that gets you excited? What's something that gets you like giddy or that you like light up?
Oof. Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. I just got kind of giddy you asking me that. So
Something came to
compliment,
mind. I know it.
compliments, obviously. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I love being in the water. Like I love sailing. I love surfing. I got into like some big wave surfing when I lived in Hawaii. That I'd feel alive. I think like, coming from the SEAL teams, like your adrenaline, when you're training, like your adrenaline's always pumping. So it is hard to kind of take that and like, okay, how do I do that now? And my body's I'm not 24 anymore, so like I'm not as invincible, but being able to find those little things to kind of like get lit up about. And really like, business is exciting for me, like solving problems, being able to like connect the dots or seeing light bulbs go off in people's head. Like I do enjoy that. But for sure, being in the water, spearfishing, doing all that. That stuff I mean, those are my hobbies, my passions. So maybe I'll figure out a way to turn it into a business one day, but we'll
Heck
see.
yeah. I was going to guess surfing. I feel like that was a common thread a lot.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is like you can apply so much of surfing to business. Like it's crazy when you start to see all the different parallels with like jujitsu, surfing, spearfishing, like it's sailing, like it's all the same stuff. So
Mm, that's good, man. I know you're doing some consulting work and stuff when it comes to operations, EOS, strategy planning, vision. Where can people find you? How should they reach out to you? What would that look like?
great question. I don't have much of a social media presence. I do have a LinkedIn, just Bradley Elder on there. Probably the
Cool.
best way to reach out. Yeah, just doing some work. I enjoy working with other small businesses that need to scale, that need some clarity. I think it's really important. So, and I enjoy doing it.
Awesome. We'll put a link to that in the description so people can reach out to you. But Brad, thanks so much, man. Appreciate you spending some time downloading your knowledge, giving us some insight into the experience, and really more than anything, I think some of the overlap between the military background and business, real estate worlds, and how much does actually translate, and how much of this I think is in pieces maybe already figured out that people are struggling with. It's like, man, the playbook is out there. The A player is out there. You just got to tap into it. So thanks so much, man. Appreciate you being on. And we'll link up soon next time I'm in San Diego.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, Ian.
All
Appreciate it,
right.
man.
Man, what a great episode with Brad. If you liked that and you would like access to more of our tools and resources, you can click the link below to get access to some of the tools that we use with our clients in Ops Academy.